My name is Jessica, and I'm 29 years old. Last Thanksgiving, I thought I was finally going to have the perfect family gathering where I could share some life-changing news. I'd just gotten accepted into graduate school for my master's in engineering, something I'd been working toward for 5 years while working full-time. I'd also been secretly dating someone amazing for 8 months and was ready to introduce him to my family. I was so excited to tell everyone, thinking maybe this time, just maybe, my family would finally see me as more than just their personal bank account and emotional support system. But instead, what happened that Thursday evening in Denver changed everything between us forever. And honestly, it was probably the wake-up call I desperately needed. Before I dive into what went down that Thanksgiving evening, I need you to understand the family dynamics that led to this explosion. Growing up in suburban Denver, I was the eldest of 3 kids in a household where being the responsible one meant being invisible unless someone needed something. My younger brother Tyler, now 26, was always the golden child who could do no wrong in my mother Sandra's eyes. He's currently finding himself as a freelance graphic designer, which really means he's been unemployed for 2 years while living in mom's basement. My youngest sister, Emma, 23, was the baby princess who got away with everything and is now working as a social media influencer with about 200 followers. But somehow this counts as a legitimate career in my family's eyes. And then there was me, Jessica, stuck right in the middle but somehow carrying all the weight. From the time I was 15, I knew I had to be the problem solver, the one who kept everything together when things fell apart. While Tyler got praised for his artistic vision when he spray painted the garage door, I had to maintain a 4.0 GPA just to get a casual "that's nice, honey." When Emma threw tantrums and broke my things, it was just her expressing her creativity. When I stood up for myself, I was being difficult and selfish. I remember working 3 part-time jobs during high school, babysitting for neighbors, working at the local coffee shop, and helping with inventory at a sporting goods store. Not because we desperately needed money, but because I thought if I could contribute financially and show my work ethic, maybe my parents would notice my value. I saved every penny to buy thoughtful gifts for birthdays and holidays, spending weeks researching the perfect presents. Tyler and Emma would grab whatever was on sale at the last minute, but somehow their gifts always got the biggest reactions and longest appreciation speeches. College was supposed to be my escape, my chance to prove myself in a field I was passionate about. I chose mechanical engineering because I loved the challenge of solving complex problems and building things that actually worked. But when I told my family about my major, my mother Sandra's reaction was immediate disappointment. "Engineering?" she said, wrinkling her nose like I'd announced I was joining a circus. "That's such a male-dominated field, Jessica. Wouldn't you be happier in something more feminine, like education or nursing? Something where you could actually help people?" The implication was clear. What I wanted to do wasn't real help, wasn't valuable, wasn't worthy of respect. But I pushed through anyway, graduated with honors, and landed my first job at an aerospace company downtown. I worked my way up slowly, taking on extra projects, staying late, coming in early, proving myself over and over again. Every small victory, every successful project, every piece of recognition I received at work, I'd call home excited to share. The conversations always followed the same pattern. "That's nice, dear. Did I tell you Tyler just got a new freelance client? He's really building his portfolio." Or, "Emma just hit 150 followers on Instagram. She's really making a name for herself in the influencer space." For years, I kept trying. I sent cards for every holiday, called every Sunday, remembered birthdays and anniversaries. I helped them move when they downsized to a smaller house 3 years ago, spending my entire vacation time packing boxes and painting walls while Tyler claimed he was too busy with a big project. And Emma said she was dealing with some personal stuff. I house sat their 2 cats whenever they went out of town, even though I'm mildly allergic and would spend the entire weekend sneezing and taking antihistamines. 2 years ago, when my father Mark had to have emergency knee surgery after a skiing accident, I was the one who took a week off work to drive him to physical therapy appointments and help around the house. Tyler was supposedly in the middle of a crucial creative phase and couldn't be disturbed, while Emma was busy with some Instagram collaboration that required her full attention. But somehow I was the one who got criticized later for not coordinating the care schedule better with my siblings. The worst part wasn't even the lack of recognition. It was the constant financial requests that started about 3 years ago and never seemed to stop. It began innocently enough. My mother called panicking because their property taxes had gone up unexpectedly and they were short about $2,000. Could I help out just this once? Of course I could. Family helps family, right? That $2,000 turned into monthly emergency requests that somehow became regular expectations. But this past year, things in my life finally started coming together in ways I'd only dreamed about. I met Ryan at a professional development conference in March. He's a software engineer at a tech startup, and from our first conversation, I knew he was different. He actually listened when I talked about my work. He asked follow-up questions about my projects. He celebrated my successes without trying to one-up them with his own achievements. For the first time in my adult life, I felt seen and valued by someone who mattered to me. Around the same time, I decided to apply for graduate school. I'd been thinking about getting my master's in engineering for years, but between work demands and family obligations, I'd never found the time or mental energy to actually apply. With Ryan's encouragement, I finally submitted my application to 3 programs, including my dream school at Colorado State University. When I got accepted with a partial scholarship, I was over the moon. I couldn't wait to share both pieces of news with my family at Thanksgiving. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely proud of what I'd accomplished and excited about my future. I thought maybe this time would be different. Thanksgiving morning started exactly like every year at my childhood home on Elm Street. The house was decorated with the same autumn-themed decorations my mother had been using for the past 15 years. Orange and brown tablecloths, plastic turkey centerpieces, and those weird scarecrow figures that had seen better days. The smell of turkey and stuffing filled the air, and football was already playing on the TV in the living room. I arrived around 11 a.m. with my arms full of carefully chosen gifts and my heart full of nervous excitement. Ryan was spending Thanksgiving with his own family in California, but we'd planned to introduce him to everyone at Christmas. I'd been carrying my acceptance letter in my purse for 2 weeks, wanting to share the news in person rather than over the phone. My dad greeted me at the door with one of his usual side hugs. Mark has always been the more emotionally available parent, though emotionally available is relative in our family. "Hey there, engineer," he said, taking some of the dishes I'd brought from my arms. "How's the job treating you?" "Actually, Dad, I have some incredible news to share with everyone," I said, practically bouncing with excitement. "Oh yeah? Can't wait to hear it, kiddo." My mother appeared in the hallway wearing the same burgundy sweater she wore every Thanksgiving. She looked me up and down with that familiar expression, the one that somehow managed to find fault before I'd even said hello. "Jessica, what happened to your hair? It looks like you just rolled out of bed, and those jeans make you look heavier than usual. Didn't I tell you that dark colours aren't flattering on your complexion? Emma looks absolutely stunning today. You should ask her for some style tips." "Happy Thanksgiving to you too, Mom," I replied, forcing a smile. "I actually spent time on my hair this morning, and these are new jeans." "Well, you should have spent more time," she said, turning back toward the kitchen. "Emma just posted the most gorgeous selfie. She's really mastered the art of presentation. You could learn something from her." My sister Emma was already in the living room, looking indeed gorgeous in a perfectly coordinated outfit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She was posing for Instagram photos with the Thanksgiving decorations, taking dozens of shots to get the perfect angle. Tyler was sprawled on the couch in his usual uniform of rumpled clothes and bedhead, scrolling through his phone and eating chips directly from the bag. "Look who finally decided to grace us with her presence," Emma said without looking up from her phone. "We've been waiting to take family photos." "I'm literally 10 minutes early," I replied, but nobody seemed to be listening. The gift exchange happened before dinner, just like always. Tyler had clearly grabbed something from the gas station on his way over, a generic box of chocolates and a wilted bouquet of flowers that looked like they'd been sitting in a cooler for weeks. But my mother acted like he'd travelled to Europe to hand-select artisanal treats. "Oh, Tyler, these chocolates look expensive, and flowers on Thanksgiving. How thoughtful and creative of you. You always know exactly what to do." Emma had bought our parents a subscription box for artisanal coffee experiences, which she explained was perfect for their morning routine. The fact that both my parents hate coffee and only drink tea seemed to escape everyone's attention, but my mother gushed about how innovative and modern the gift was. I'd spent weeks researching and selecting personalised gifts for everyone. For my parents, I'd commissioned a custom photo book documenting our family history, complete with restored vintage photos and handwritten stories from relatives. For Tyler, I'd gotten a high-end digital tablet specifically designed for graphic artists, thinking it might help with his freelance work. For Emma, I'd found a professional lighting kit for photography and videos, perfect for her social media ambitions. "Oh, how nice," my mother said, flipping through the photo book quickly. "This must have taken you some time to put together." "I spent about 60 hours researching our family history and digitizing all the old photos," I said. "I even interviewed Grandma Ruth about the stories behind some of the pictures before she passed last year." "That's sweet, dear," she replied, already setting the book aside. "Tyler, show everyone that amazing portfolio website you launched last week." And just like that, the conversation moved on. My dad squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "This is incredible work, Jess. Thank you." But the moment had already passed. As the afternoon wore on, extended family members started arriving. My aunt Carol and Uncle Jim, my cousins Madison and Jake, and my grandmother Helen. The house filled with laughter and conversation, and I found myself gravitating toward the kitchen, helping my mother with last-minute dinner preparations like I always did. "The sweet potatoes need to come out in 15 minutes, she instructed without looking up from the gravy she was stirring. "And someone needs to carve the turkey. Where's Tyler?" "He's in the living room watching football with Uncle Jim." "Well, he shouldn't have to worry about kitchen work. He's been so stressed with his new business ventures." I bit my tongue. Tyler's business ventures consisted of occasionally designing logos for friends who felt sorry for him. But apparently, that counted as high-stress entrepreneurship, while my 60-hour work weeks at an actual corporation were just my regular job. As dinner time approached, I felt my nerves building. I'd planned to make my announcement during dessert, when everyone would be relaxed and in a good mood. I kept touching the acceptance letter in my purse, reminding myself that this was good news, exciting news, the kind of news that should bring families together. But as I watched my mother light up every time Tyler mentioned his latest creative project, or Emma showed off her newest Instagram posts, I started to wonder if I was setting myself up for disappointment once again. Dinner was served at 4 p.m. sharp, just like every Thanksgiving for as long as I could remember. The dining room table was set with my mother's best china, the same pattern she'd been using for special occasions since I was a child. Grandma Helen sat at one end, my father at the other, and the rest of us filled in according to an unspoken hierarchy that somehow always put me between my youngest cousin and whoever happened to be visiting. The conversation flowed easily around familiar topics. Tyler's latest attempts at freelance graphic design, Emma's growing social media presence, my cousin Madison's recent engagement to her college boyfriend. I participated when spoken to, laughed at my Uncle Jim's terrible dad jokes, and complimented my Aunt Carol's new haircut, all while waiting for the right moment to share my own news. "So, Jessica," my grandmother said during a lull in conversation, "are you still working at that airplane company downtown?" "Aerospace space company, Grandma, and yes, I am. Actually, I have some really exciting news about that." Before I could continue, my mother jumped in. "Jessica thinks building airplane parts is the same as having a real career. I keep telling her she should consider going back to school for something more practical like teaching or nursing, something that actually makes a difference in people's lives." "Engineering is a real career, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And actually, that's part of my exciting news. I just got accepted into graduate school for my master's in mechanical engineering." There was a moment of polite congratulations from around the table. My father's face broke into a genuine smile, and my grandmother reached over to squeeze my hand, but my mother's expression remained unchanged, almost bored. "When did this happen?" Emma asked, looking up from her phone for the first time all evening. "I got the acceptance letter 3 weeks ago. I wanted to tell everyone in person. I'm starting classes in January while continuing to work full-time. It's going to be challenging, but I'm really excited about the program." "Graduate school," my mother said, her voice carrying a tone I knew all too well. "Well, I suppose that's one way to avoid getting a real job for a few more years." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Mom, I have a real job. I've had a real job for 6 years. This is about advancing my career and specializing in aerospace propulsion systems." "If you say so, dear," she replied dismissively. "I just think it's interesting that you're going back to school at your age when most people are settling down and starting families. Speaking of which, are you seeing anyone? Because Tyler just started dating this lovely girl he met at a coffee shop. She's a nurse. Now there's a career that actually helps people." I felt the familiar sting of my accomplishments being minimized and redirected to my siblings' supposedly superior life choices. But I wasn't ready to give up yet. "Actually, I am seeing someone. His name is Ryan, and he's a software engineer. We've been together for 8 months now, and he's been incredibly supportive of my career goals." "A software engineer," Tyler said with a snort. "Let me guess, another antisocial computer nerd who spends all day staring at screens." "He's actually very social and outgoing," I replied. "He's brilliant and kind and treats me with more respect than I've ever experienced in a relationship." "Well, we'll believe that when we see it," Emma chimed in. "Jessica's always been terrible at reading people. Remember her last boyfriend? What a disaster that was." My last relationship had ended 2 years ago when my then boyfriend made it clear he expected me to choose between my career ambitions and our future together. When I chose my career, my family had made it abundantly clear they thought I'd made the wrong choice. "Ryan is nothing like Marcus," I said firmly. "He actually encourages my professional goals instead of trying to sabotage them." "Well, let's hope you don't drive this one away too," my mother said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "You do have a tendency to be intense about work, Men don't usually find that attractive in a woman. The conversation continued around me, but I felt like I was underwater, watching everything happen from a distance. My acceptance to graduate school, something I'd worked toward for years, had been dismissed as avoiding real responsibility. My relationship with Ryan, the healthiest and most supportive I'd ever had, was being mocked before my family had even met him. As dessert was being served, my mother launched into a detailed account of Tyler's recent accomplishments. He'd supposedly been offered a contract with a major company to redesign their logo, which would be his biggest client yet. Each detail was described with glowing pride, my mother's face practically radiating excitement. And Emma, she continued seamlessly, just landed a collaboration with a local boutique. They're going to feature her in their spring campaign. She's really building her brand as an influencer. That's amazing, I said, genuinely trying to be supportive. Congratulations, Emma. Thanks, she said, but her attention was already back on her phone, probably documenting her Thanksgiving dessert for her Instagram story. I sat there listening to the praise being heaped on my siblings, waiting for someone to circle back to my graduate school acceptance or ask more questions about Ryan, but it never happened. It was as if I'd never spoken, as if my news didn't matter enough to warrant more than a few seconds of polite acknowledgement. That's when my mother looked directly at me and said something that would change our relationship forever. You know, Jessica, I've been thinking about this graduate school thing, and I have to be honest. I'm worried about you. The table went quiet. Even my cousins looked up from their phones. What do you mean? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew where this was going. Well, let's be realistic here. You're 29 years old. You're still single, you're going back to school instead of advancing in your career, and you're spending all your time on work instead of building a real life. You're the most disappointing child we have. I just hope you figure out what actually matters before it's too late. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel every pair of eyes at the table staring at me, waiting to see how I would react. My Aunt Carol looked horrified. My father was shaking his head in disbelief. Even Tyler and Emma seemed shocked by the cruelty of the comment. But for the first time in my life, instead of shrinking back and accepting it, instead of making excuses or trying to laugh it off, I felt something different rising up inside me. It wasn't just anger, though there was plenty of that. It was clarity. It was 29 years of suppressed frustration finally finding its voice. I stood up slowly, my hands trembling with emotion, and looked my mother directly in the eyes. Then stop calling me when you need money, I said, my voice steady and clear. Her face fell completely. The silence that followed my words was so complete I could hear the football game still playing in the living room and the distant sound of neighbours talking in their backyard. My mother's face went from confident superiority to something I'd never seen before, genuine shock mixed with what like panic. What are you talking about? She asked, but her voice had lost all its earlier authority. I'm talking about the $2,500 I've been sending you every month for the past 3 years to help with your mortgage payments because Dad's hours got cut at the factory. I'm talking about the $8,000 I gave you last year when your car broke down and you needed a new transmission. I'm talking about the $5,000 I sent to cover Tyler's student loan payments when he defaulted because his freelance career wasn't bringing in any income. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, my fingers surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Want to see the receipts? I continued, holding up the screen, because I have them all right here. Every transfer, every emergency loan, every time I've prioritized your financial stability over my own savings and goals. My Uncle Jim had put down his fork and was listening intently. My grandmother was nodding slowly, as if pieces of a puzzle were finally clicking into place. My cousins were staring at me with their mouths slightly open. Jessica, my father started, but I wasn't finished. Remember last Christmas when Emma's rent was late because she'd spent her deposit money on photography equipment for her Instagram? Who do you think covered that $1,200? It wasn't you guys because you were still paying off Dad's medical bills from his gallbladder surgery. It was me. Money I'd been saving for a down payment on a house. Emma's face had gone pale. Jess, I didn't know you were the one who paid that. Mom said it was coming from their savings. Of course you didn't know, because Mom made me promise not to tell anyone. She said it would embarrass you and that I should just consider it my contribution to the family. My contribution, as if I haven't been contributing my entire adult life. I turned back to my mother, who was opening and closing her mouth like she was trying to find words that wouldn't come. You want to know why I'm going to graduate school? Because despite sending thousands of dollars to this family every year, despite working overtime to cover everyone else's emergencies, despite sacrificing my own financial goals to keep all of you afloat, I still managed to get accepted into a competitive engineering program. The disappointing child is the one who's been keeping this family's finances stable while being told she's worthless. I never asked you to do that, my mother said weakly. You absolutely did ask. You called me crying about the mortgage, you called me panicking about the car, you called me begging for help with Tyler's loans, and every single time I helped because that's what families are supposed to do. But apparently, that's only what the disappointing child does, while the successful ones get all the credit and none of the responsibility. Tyler finally spoke up, his voice quiet. Jess, I had no idea you were the one who paid my student loans. I thought Mom and Dad had worked something out with the bank. Of course you didn't know, because you never asked. None of you ever ask about my life beyond what you need from me. When was the last time any of you called just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you celebrated something good happening in my life? When was the last time you treated me like a person instead of an ATM? I opened my banking app and started reading actual numbers and dates out loud. March 15th, 2023, $2,500 to Sandra Martinez for mortgage assistance. April 3rd, $2,500 to Sandra Martinez for mortgage assistance. May 12th, $3,000 to Mark Martinez for car repairs. June 1st, $2,500 to Sandra Martinez for mortgage assistance. My father was staring at my mother with an expression I'd never seen before. Sandra, is this true? You've been taking money from Jessica for 3 years? It's not what it sounds like, she said quickly. Jessica was just helping out temporarily while we got back on our feet after your hour cuts. Temporarily? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. 3 years, Mom. 3 years of monthly payments. 3 years of me living paycheck to paycheck while you drove around in a car I helped pay for, complaining about how disappointing your eldest daughter is. My grandmother reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Sweetheart, why didn't you tell any of us about this? Because I thought if I could just help enough, if I could just prove my value to this family somehow, maybe I'd finally earn the love and respect that Tyler and Emma seem to get for just existing. I thought if I could be useful, even if it was just financially, maybe Mom would stop looking at me like I was a burden. The tears I'd been holding back for years were finally coming, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of release, of finally speaking a truth I'd been carrying alone for too long. You want to know about Ryan? He sees someone who's been working full-time while putting herself through the grad school application process. He sees someone who's been sacrificing her own financial goals to support her family while they belittle her career. He sees someone who's been the actual backbone of this family while being treated like she's worthless. My Aunt Carol was shaking her head in disbelief. Jessica, honey, I had no idea. How much money are we talking about here? I pulled up my banking records and did quick math in my head. Over the past 3 years, approximately $75,000. That's not including smaller amounts for various emergencies or the times I've covered restaurant bills and family expenses when we're all together. The number hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. Even Emma had put down her phone and was staring at me with something that might have been respect for the first time in years. $75,000, my father repeated slowly. Jessica, I had no idea your mother was asking you for this much money. Why didn't you tell me? Because Mom made me promise not to. She said it would hurt your pride and that as the most financially stable one, it was my responsibility to help. Funny how I went from being the most disappointing to the most financially stable, depending on what she needed from me. My mother finally found her voice again. You're being dramatic, Jessica. Families help each other. That's what we do. No, Mom. What families do is support each other emotionally and treat each other with respect. What you do is take my money while telling everyone how worthless I am. What you do is use me as a financial safety net while treating me like an embarrassment. I stood up and pushed my chair back from the table. Well, congratulations. You're about to find out exactly how disappointing I really am. Because as of today, the Bank of Jessica is permanently closed. The immediate aftermath of my revelation was chaos. As soon as I announced that I was done being the family's financial safety net, multiple conversations erupted around the table simultaneously. My Aunt Carol was demanding to know how long this had been going on. My Uncle Jim was asking my father if he knew about the money. My grandmother was looking at my mother with an expression of profound disappointment. Jessica, wait, my mother said, standing up as I gathered my purse and coat. Let's talk about this privately. There's no need to air our family business in front of everyone. Our family business? I turned back to face her. You mean the family business where you humiliate me in front of these same people every chance you get? The family business where you just announce to everyone that I'm the most disappointing child you have? I think they're entitled to know the truth about how this family really operates. You're being vindictive, she accused, but her voice was shaking. I'm being honest. For the first time in my adult life, I'm being completely honest about what's been happening in this family. And if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should ask yourself why. My cousin Madison spoke up from across the table. Jess, are you serious about the money? You've really been supporting them financially all this time? Dead serious. I can show you bank statements going back years if you want proof. My father was staring at my mother with a mixture of confusion and anger. Sandra, we need to talk about this right now. Not in front of everyone, she hissed. Why not? I asked. You had no problem discussing my failures in front of everyone. You had no problem announcing to the entire table that I'm disappointing. So why is it suddenly inappropriate to discuss the truth? Tyler finally spoke up, his voice uncertain. Jess, about my student loans. I really didn't know it was you who paid them off. I thought Mom and Dad had worked something out. I know you didn't know, I said, and I meant it. But Tyler, can I ask you something? In all the years we've been adults, have you ever once asked me if I needed help with anything? Have you ever inquired about my finances, my career struggles, my personal life beyond the bare minimum? He was quiet for a long moment. No, he finally admitted. I guess I just assumed you had everything figured out. You assumed I had everything figured out because it was easier than actually paying attention to my life. Just like it was easier for Emma to assume someone else would handle family emergencies, and easier for Mom to assume I'd always be there to bail everyone out while she criticized everything about me. Emma finally looked up from her phone. Her face flushed. I don't understand why you didn't just say no if you didn't want to help. Because I did want to help. I exclaimed. I wanted to help because I love this family despite everything. I wanted to help because I thought maybe if I proved my value in some tangible way, I'd finally be treated like I mattered. But I see now that no amount of financial support was ever going to change how you all see me. My grandmother cleared her throat and the room went quiet. When Helen Martinez spoke, people listened. She'd been the matriarch of our family for as long as I could remember, and her opinion carried weight with everyone. Sandra, she said, her voice stern in a way I rarely heard, I'm deeply disappointed in you. This young woman has been sacrificing her own financial security to help this family, and you've been treating her like she's worthless. That's not just ungrateful, it's cruel. Mother, you don't understand the whole situation, my mom started. I understand enough. I understand that Jessica has been working full-time and putting herself through graduate school applications while financially supporting half this family. I understand that she just shared incredible news about her acceptance to graduate school, which should be one of the proudest moments of her life. And instead of celebrating with her, you used it as an opportunity to tear her down. The room was silent, except for the sound of my mother's rapid breathing. I'd never seen her called out so directly by her own mother before. And another thing, my grandmother continued, I've watched this girl grow up, and she's never been anything but kind, generous, and hard-working. If she's the most disappointing child you have, Sandra, then you have no idea how to measure a person's worth. My Aunt Carol nodded emphatically. I have to agree with Mom. Jess, I had no idea you were dealing with all of this. I always wondered why you seemed so stressed during family gatherings. I wasn't stressed, I said quietly. I was exhausted, emotionally, financially, and physically exhausted from trying to be enough for a family that had already decided I never would be. My mother made one last attempt to regain control of the narrative. Jessica, you're making this sound much worse than it is. We're family. We help each other. And I never said you were disappointing. You literally just called me the most disappointing child you have in front of everyone after I shared that I got into graduate school. What exactly would you call that? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. You know what, Mom? It doesn't matter anymore. I'm done trying to earn your approval. I'm done sacrificing my own happiness and financial security for people who don't even see me as a real person. I'm done being the family's safety net while being treated like the family disappointment. I walked toward the door but turned back one more time. Ryan and I are building a beautiful life together, and we're going to do it without the constant criticism and financial manipulation that I've been accepting as normal for the past 29 years. Anyone who wants to be part of that life with respect and kindness is welcome. Anyone who doesn't can keep my phone number for emergencies, but don't expect me to answer. And with that, I walked out of my childhood home, leaving behind a table full of shocked faces and a mother who was finally experiencing what it felt like to be the one left speechless. The week following Thanksgiving was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. My phone started ringing before I even made it to my apartment that evening, and it didn't stop for days. But for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't answering every call immediately. I wasn't dropping everything to manage other people's emotions or solve their problems. Ryan had driven straight to my place from the airport when I called him crying from my car in my parents' driveway. He found me sitting on my couch at midnight, still in my Thanksgiving outfit, staring at my phone as it buzzed with incoming calls and text messages. I can't believe I actually did that. I kept saying, I can't believe I finally said all of that out loud. I can, he said, pulling me close. I've been waiting for you to stand up to them for months. I just didn't want to push because I knew you had to get there on your own. But what if I was wrong? What if I was too harsh? Jess, he said gently, you've been paying your parents' mortgage for 3 years while your mother told people you were disappointing. There's no universe in which you were too harsh. The messages started pouring in that night and continued for days. My father called first, his voice heavy with what sounded like genuine regret. Jessica, sweetheart, I had no idea your mother was asking you for so much money. I'm so sorry if I'd known. Dad, it's not just about the money. It's about the way she's treated me my entire life. The money was just the final straw. I know, honey. I've been thinking a lot about that since you left. And you're right. I should have stood up for you more over the years. I should have said something when she made those comments. It was the first real apology I'd ever received from anyone in my family, and it meant more than I could express. Tyler called the next day, his voice shaky. Jess, I feel terrible about the loan situation. I want to pay you back every penny. It's not about paying me back, Tyler. It's about the fact that for all these years, you've been perfectly happy to assume that someone else would handle family problems while you focused on your art. You never once asked if I needed help or support. You're right, he said quietly. I guess I always saw you as the one who had everything together, the responsible one. I was the one who couldn't say no. There's a difference. Emma took 4 days to call, and when she did, she was defensive. I don't understand why you're being so dramatic about this, Jess. Families help each other out. It's not like anyone forced you to give us money. Emma, do you remember what you said to me at dinner? You said I was terrible at reading people and that I drive men away. Do you have any idea how that felt, coming right after Mom called me disappointing? I was just, I don't know, making conversation. It wasn't that serious. It wasn't a joke to me. It never is. Do you realize that between you and Tyler, I can't remember the last time either of you said something genuinely supportive about me? The last time you celebrated something good happening in my life? She was quiet for a long moment. I guess I never thought about it that way. That's the problem. None of you think about it. You take my support for granted while treating me like I'm the burden. My mother, predictably, was the most persistent. She called 8 times on Friday alone, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails. Jessica, this is ridiculous. Call me back so we can discuss this like adults. Jessica, you're being incredibly selfish. Your father is upset, and this is affecting the whole family. Jessica, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this attitude needs to stop. We're your family. On Sunday, she tried a different approach. Jessica, honey, I think I may have spoken too harshly at dinner. Maybe we can work something out about the money situation. But it wasn't until Tuesday that she finally called and said something approaching what I'd been waiting 29 years to hear. Jessica, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I almost didn't answer the phone. I'd been screening her calls for days, and Ryan had been encouraging me to take my time before engaging. But something about the way she kept calling made me pick up. Hello, Mom. Jessica, thank God. Please don't hang up. I need to talk to you. I'm listening. Your father and I have been talking, and I think I owe you a real apology. What I said at dinner was unforgivable. You're not disappointing. God, Jessica, you've been incredible, and I've been treating you terribly. It was the closest thing to a genuine apology I'd ever received from her, but I wasn't ready to let my guard down completely. Mom, it's not just what you said at dinner. It's been a pattern my entire life. The constant criticism, the comparisons to Tyler and Emma, the way you dismiss my career and my accomplishments. I know, she said, and her voice was shaking. I know, and I don't have a good excuse for it. I think maybe I saw myself in you, and I was harder on you because of it. What do you mean? I was the oldest too. I know what it's like to feel like you have to carry everyone else's weight. And instead of protecting you from that feeling, I think I made it worse. I think I pushed you harder because I wanted you to be stronger than I was. It wasn't a complete explanation, and it certainly wasn't an excuse, but it was the first time my mother had ever shown me any real vulnerability or self-awareness. The money stops, Mom. All of it. No more mortgage help, no more emergency loans, no more bailing anyone out. I understand. You're right to stop. We never should have put that burden on you. And the criticism stops too. I'm not going to tolerate being belittled anymore, especially in front of other people. Okay, I'll try to do better. Don't try, Mom. Do better, because if you can't, then Ryan and I will build our life without this family's involvement. It was an ultimatum, but it felt necessary. For the first time in my life, I was setting real boundaries with consequences I was prepared to enforce. 6 months later, my life looked completely different. The constant financial stress was gone, replaced by something I'd never experienced before. Actual savings. For the first time since college, I had money left over at the end of each month. Ryan and I started seriously planning our future together. We opened joint savings accounts and began looking at houses. The emotional change was even more dramatic. Without the constant weight of family drama and financial obligations, I felt lighter, more confident, more like myself. My performance at work improved noticeably once I wasn't distracted by family emergencies and guilt-inducing phone calls. My supervisor noticed the change and mentioned potential advancement opportunities. "You seem different lately," she said during my quarterly review. "More focused, more confident in meetings. Whatever you're doing, keep it up." I was doing something I'd never done before, prioritizing my own well-being. The family dynamics shifted dramatically once the financial safety net was removed. My father, it turned out, had been completely unaware of the extent to which my mother had been borrowing money from me. When he discovered the full scope of it, he was furious. "3 years, Sandra. You've been taking money from our daughter for 3 years without telling me." They ended up going to financial counseling together, something that probably should have happened years earlier. My father picked up extra consulting work to supplement their income, and my mother finally admitted they'd been living beyond their means. Tyler and Emma, meanwhile, were forced to confront their own assumptions about family support. Tyler called me 2 months after Thanksgiving with an update that surprised me. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he told me, "about how I never asked if you needed help. And you're right, I was so focused on my own problems that I never considered you might have your own. I appreciate you saying that. I want to do better, and I want to start by asking, is there anything you need help with? Anything I can do to support you?" It was such a simple question, but it was the first time any of my siblings had ever asked it. We ended up having a 3-hour conversation about my career goals, my relationship with Ryan, and my plans for graduate school. For the first time in our adult lives, Tyler seemed genuinely interested in my life as a person, rather than just as a family obligation. Emma took longer to come around. She was still defensive about the money situation and seemed to view my boundary setting as a personal attack rather than a necessary change. But even she eventually started to shift her perspective, especially after a conversation with our grandmother. Grandma Helen had apparently given both of my siblings quite the talking to about their treatment of me over the years. "Your sister has been sacrificing for this family while you two were building your lives," she told them. "The least you can do is treat her with the respect she deserves." My relationship with my mother remained the most complicated. She was clearly trying to change her behavior, but decades of ingrained patterns don't disappear overnight. She'd catch herself mid-criticism and apologize, or make an effort to ask about my work in a way that didn't sound dismissive. It felt forced at first, but gradually started to feel more genuine. The real test came when Ryan and I got engaged 6 months later. I'd been dreading the inevitable commentary and attempts to control the process, but to my surprise, my mother mostly kept her opinions to herself. When she did offer suggestions, she prefaced them with things like, "just an idea," or "only if you think it would work." "I like the venue you chose," she said during one of our planning sessions. "The photos you showed me are beautiful." It was such a normal, supportive comment that I almost didn't know how to respond. This was what healthy family interaction was supposed to look like. My father, on the other hand, threw himself into wedding planning with enthusiasm I hadn't expected. He offered to help with costs, insisted on walking me down the aisle, and spent hours researching vendors with me. It was as if he was trying to make up for years of standing by while my mother criticized me. "I'm so proud of you," he told me one afternoon as we toured potential venues. "Not just for standing up to your mother, but for building such a good life for yourself. Ryan's a lucky man." Coming from my father, those words meant everything. The biggest surprise was how many other family members reached out to support me once they learned the full story. My Aunt Carol started calling regularly just to check in. My cousin Madison asked if she could help with wedding planning. Even some of my more distant relatives made efforts to connect with me in ways they never had before. "I always sensed there was tension," my Aunt Carol explained, "but I never realized how bad it was. Your mother has always been intense, but I didn't know she was being so unfair to you." It turned out that several family members had noticed the dynamic over the years, but hadn't felt comfortable intervening. My Thanksgiving outburst had given them permission to address what they'd been seeing but ignoring. The most meaningful change was in my relationship with Ryan's family. Without the constant drain of my own family's drama, I was able to invest more emotional energy in building relationships with his parents and siblings. They welcomed me with an openness and warmth that I'd never experienced. For the first time, I understood what healthy family dynamics actually looked like. "Your family is so normal," I told Ryan after a Sunday dinner with his parents, where no one criticized anyone and everyone seemed genuinely happy to be together. "Yours can be too," he said. "It just takes time and boundaries." He was right. Slowly, carefully, with clear expectations and consequences, some of my family relationships were beginning to heal. Not all of them, and not completely, but enough to give me hope that the future could be different from the past. 1 year after that Thanksgiving dinner, Ryan and I were married in a beautiful ceremony at a mountain resort outside Denver. The guest list was carefully curated, including only people who had shown genuine support for our relationship and respect for both of us as individuals. My father walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes. My grandmother sat in the front row, beaming with pride. My mother was there too, dressed beautifully and behaving perfectly, but I could see the effort it was taking her to hold back her usual commentary. Tyler and Emma both attended and even seemed genuinely happy for us, but the people who mattered most were the ones who had supported me unconditionally. Ryan's family, who had embraced me from the beginning. My Aunt Carol and cousin Madison, who had become real sources of emotional support. My longtime friends, who had watched me struggle with family dynamics for years, and were thrilled to see me finally standing up for myself. "You look radiant," my grandmother whispered as she hugged me after the ceremony. "Not just beautiful, but truly happy. That's what I've been waiting to see." During the reception, my father gave a speech that brought me to tears. "Jessica has always been the heart of our family," he said, "even when we didn't appreciate her properly. She's kind, generous, hardworking, and loyal to a fault. Ryan, you're not just marrying a wonderful woman. You're marrying someone who will move heaven and earth for the people she loves. I just hope you never take that for granted, the way some of us have." It was his public acknowledgement of the years of imbalance, and it meant everything to me. Even my mother managed to say something appropriate during her brief remarks. "Jessica, I'm sorry it took me so long to see what an amazing daughter I have. I hope you and Ryan build a beautiful life together." It wasn't a complete repair of our relationship, but it was progress. The most important moment of the day, though, came during our first dance. As Ryan and I swayed to music in front of all the people who truly cared about us, I realized that I felt something I'd never felt before at a family gathering, completely genuinely happy. "No regrets?" Ryan whispered in my ear. "None," I said, and I meant it completely. The months that followed were a revelation. Marriage to Ryan was everything I'd hoped it would be and more. We bought a house together using the money I'd been able to save once I stopped subsidizing my family's lifestyle. We traveled. We entertained friends. We built traditions that were ours alone. My career flourished in ways I'd never imagined possible. Without the constant emotional drain of family drama, I had energy to invest in my work that I'd never had before. I completed my master's degree with honors while working full-time, led successful projects, and earned a promotion to senior engineer. The girl who had been called disappointing was now being recruited by other companies. Some family relationships continued to improve gradually. My father and I developed a genuine friendship, talking regularly about everything from work to books to his new hobby of woodworking. Tyler made real efforts to be present in my life, calling to check in, and even asking for my advice on career matters. My grandmother became one of my closest confidants, someone I could talk to about anything without fear of judgment. My relationship with my mother remained complicated, but functional. She still struggled with her tendency to criticize, but she caught herself more often and made real efforts to be supportive. When I told her I was considering pursuing my PhD, she surprised me by saying, "That sounds like a wonderful opportunity. You'd be excellent at that." It wasn't the enthusiastic support I might have gotten for Tyler or Emma, but it was respectful and encouraging, which was more than I'd ever expected from her. Emma and I found a cordial but distant equilibrium. We were polite at family gatherings and exchanged pleasantries, but we never developed the close relationship I'd hoped for. That was okay, though. I'd learned that not all family relationships can be fixed, and that's not necessarily a reflection of personal failure. The most profound change was internal. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't constantly seeking approval or trying to prove my worth. I knew who I was, what I'd accomplished, and what I brought to my relationships. Ryan's love and respect had shown me what it felt like to be valued for who I truly was, and I'd learned to value myself the same way. One evening, almost 2 years after our wedding, Ryan and I were having dinner when my phone rang. It was my mother, which wasn't unusual by then, but something in her voice was different. "Jessica, I need to tell you something," she said. "Your father and I were at the grocery store today, and I ran into Mrs. Patterson from church. She was asking about you, and I found myself telling her about your promotion and your house and how proud I am of you. And then I realized, I don't think I've ever actually told you that." "Told me what, Mom?" "That I'm proud of you. That I've always been proud of you, even when I was too stubborn or too focused on what I thought success should look like to admit it. You're an incredible woman, Jessica. You're brilliant and strong and successful and generous, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say that out loud." It was the conversation I'd been waiting for my entire life, and it came at a time when I no longer needed it to feel complete. But that made it even more meaningful, because it felt genuine rather than desperate. "Thank you, Mom," I said. "That means a lot." "I love you, sweetheart. I should have been saying that more often too. I love you too." After I hung up, Ryan looked at me with a smile. How does it feel? Good, I said, and I was surprised to realize I meant it. It feels really good. But also, I think I would have been okay either way. And that was the real victory. Not that my family had finally learned to treat me with respect, though that was wonderful. The real victory was that I'd learned to respect myself enough to demand better treatment and to build a life that didn't depend on their approval for my happiness. I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for others is to stop accepting unacceptable behavior. I'd learned that financial independence and emotional independence go hand in hand. Most importantly, I'd learned that the family you choose can be just as important as the family you're born into. The little girl who had spent her childhood trying to earn love had grown into a woman who knew she was worthy of love just as she was, and that made all the difference in the world. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took your support for granted? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about standing up for yourself and finding your worth. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve to be treated with respect, regardless of family dynamics. Remember, you teach people how to treat you, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop accepting less than you deserve. Thank you for reading my story, and I hope it helps someone else find the courage to speak their truth. Wishing you all the strength to know your worth and the courage to demand the respect you deserve.